Good morning, everyone. I'm Karina Hill, and on behalf of the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association, we'd like to welcome you to today's webinar entitled Strategies for X, Y, and Z Generations. Prevention is for Everyone with Ashley Gonzler. This webinar is being made available through a collaboration of the Florida Department of Children and Families Office of Substance Abuse and Mental Health and the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association. Please note that as an attendee, you are in listen-only mode, and you will only be able to view your name. If you have questions, please send them to the presenter and the host by using the chat panel only. The button to open the chat panel is usually located on the upper right side of your monitor. Again, please use the chat panel to send any questions you may have as you think of them, and the presenter will address them as time permits. Our audio is broadcast through the internet to your computer. If you experience poor computer audio, there are a few options to try on screen right now, and those options are posted in the chat panel too. If you continue to experience poor audio, you want to try rejoining the webinar and calling using the telephone I will call in option. You must be connected to the audio of this presentation and be able to view it on screen as well to receive a certificate of attendance. The recording and materials used in today's presentation will be available on the FADA website within 30 business days, and it will be located in our Resource Center training library. I did post the link to the presentation materials in our chat panel if you're interested in printing those out. The archive video displays what looks like an error message, and it's only a delay buffer, so you want to just ignore it, hit play, and enjoy. Again, you can access the recording in PowerPoint in the Resource Center training library. FADA produces many webinars and workshops through the support of the Florida Department of Children and Families. To help participants track credits earned through attendance, we host an online community that provides a personalized digital journal where participants can maintain statements of credit for webinars and workshops taken through the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association. At the end of today's webinar, the web browser will direct everyone to an evaluation form on the FADA website. You will first need to register or sign into your account to complete the evaluation. Again, you must create an account with the FADA website to complete the evaluation. And information you provide FADA as part of registering remains confidential. Statements of credit will be posted within 30 business days after the evaluation closes in individual professional development journals for persons completing the evaluation and attending the full webinar. Completing the evaluation is necessary to receive CE credits or to access your statement of credit. Please note that the evaluation will close at midnight on Monday, March the 9th. 1 to 2 continuing education credits are available for participating in today's webinar for persons licensed through the Board of Nursing, the Board of Clinical Social Work, Marriage and Family Therapy, and Mental Health Counseling, and for persons credentialed through the Florida Certification Board. If you are a licensed healthcare practitioner, be sure to include your Florida license number for reporting to CE Broker when you register with our site for the first time. Please note that WebEx does monitor your arrival and departure, and it provides a report upon completion of this event. We are not permitted to provide contact hours or a certificate of attendance if you do not attend the entire webinar. We are not permitted to provide partial credit. And with that being said, I would like to introduce our presenter, Ashley Gonzler. She leads a specialty coordinated care team comprised of clinicians, prescribers, peer mentors, education, and employment specialists who collaborate to support transition age youth at Thresholds Emergency Adults Division in Chicago, Illinois. In this role, she engages in preventative work, crisis intervention, and uses a strength-based approach to help young adults and their families with identifying tangible ways to break generational cycles and begin to create sustainable, healthy, and adaptive patterns. A graduate of Michigan State University, Ashley holds advanced training in cognitive behavioral therapy for psychosis, a best practice for treating individuals experiencing their first episode of psychosis, and is trained in the structured interview of psychosis risk syndromes to detect individuals at clinical high risk of developing psychosis. As a CHR team leader, she is committed to identifying and providing preventative treatment to individuals most at risk of developing serious mental illness. And Ashley, if you're ready, I'll go ahead and turn the presentation over to you.
Yes, thank you, Karina. I want to take a moment to thank Karina, the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association, and Florida Department of Children and Families for allowing me to present today, and for all of you taking the time to join this webinar. I know that one thing I've certainly learned over the past year with the pandemic is how valuable time is, and so I appreciate you all making time to join this presentation. So let me tell you a little bit more about myself. I work with Thresholds, which is one of the biggest providers of mental health services in the state of Illinois. I work with the young adult division, and working with young people is something I'm passionate about and has shaped my career. This is why I'm excited to present these materials with you all, because if there's anything I've learned about working with young adults and youth is that we need to be adaptive, which is the theme today for today's training. So with the MindStrong program, that's a multi-step care program that uses a multidisciplinary, evidence-informed approach to both identify and treat young people at risk for serious mental health challenges or emerging psychosis symptoms. Early assessment and services are key in the return of young people to a healthy and fulfilling life. So this program started in 2017, and I've been a part of the program just shy of 3 years now. And if there's anything I've learned is that with the new program is there's lots of bumps in the road, questions, concerns, and areas for growth. So I'm hoping that that will come through in my presentation today about how to adapt and adjust in the way we serve and provide support to individuals across different generations. For today's presentation, we'll start off going over the generational differences and motivations in order to strengthen our working relationships with generations X, Y, and Z. We'll increase our understanding of substance use trends and patterns, and then we'll do prevention strategies that are evidence-based and tailored for each generation. I have a resource page that will be available at the end of the PowerPoint that I'm hoping to be able to go over with you all as well. But before we get started today, I like to take a moment to pause and reflect and do a mindfulness activity. This is something I tend to do when I'm having an individual session with a client in order to help ground us to the present moment. So the card deck I'm using are just called mindfulness cards. I got them from Target. They've been really great and useful in my practice with young adults. And the one I chose for this morning is called No Intention. And here's what it says. Everything we do starts with an intention, a small movement of the mind that starts a chain reaction and ends in a full-blown action. Most of the time, these intentions are all lovely and good, and often we're not even aware of our intentions at all. But sometimes our intentions are a little bit more negative than we'd like them to be. Try putting some energy into recognizing your intentions and the thoughts behind your decisions. This will give you the power to either act on them or not, instead of operating on intention autopilot. So let's go ahead and dive into the why behind this presentation, the why behind why some of you signed up for this presentation today and are dedicating your time over the course of the next 2 hours. So given the impact of substance misuse on public health and the increased risk for long-term medical consequences, including substance use disorders, it is critical to prevent substance misuse from starting and to identify those who have already begun to misuse substances and intervene early. The purpose of this training isn't something new. The work you do to support individuals who participate in substance use is important. And now it is even more critical that we are both intentional and informed in the way that we present and provide services in order to disrupt the individual and systemic impact substance use can have. Evidence-based prevention interventions carried out before the need for treatment are critical because they can delay early use and stop the progression from use to problematic use or to a substance use disorder, including its severest form, addiction, all of which are associated with costly individual, social, and public health consequences. I want you all to take a moment to reflect here. Consider within your own life, both personally and professionally, what does prevention mean to you? So please write in the chat what prevention means to you, and I will read some off just to think about why it's important, why you signed up for this training today. Being able to reflect on the services that you provide and areas maybe you're looking to get more support or improvement. Okay, so we have some answers coming in and I'm going to read them out loud. So we have education, decision-making skills, awesome. Avoiding unwanted behavior. I love it. Prevention means obtaining strategies to prevent harmful behavior, stopping an action before it occurs. And we have education again, which is super important. And I'll talk later about how we can be intentional about what education we're giving to help avoid negative life events or behaviors, including illegal, unhappy, etc. Reduce consequences of substance abuse, yes. So prevention, this one's a really good one. Prevention means being proactive at utilizing strengths-based strategies to promote a positive outcome. I really like that one, Chantel. To educate others about the need for prevention, practicing skills, tools, and education to prevent unwanted behaviors or circumstances from happening. I'm loving these because it's not just about wanting to stop something, but also too, like thinking about what comes after that, what comes next, because while use has those immediate rewards or moments of maybe like happiness or just relief, long term it can create really challenging situations for people that are really hard to get out of. Work time investments taken to identify or lessen risk and risky behaviors before these negative consequences happen. I really like what you all are saying, very strength-based, creating resilience against maladaptive behaviors. Again, you all are thinking on the same wavelengths. Creating hope. Yes, that's so important, Kathleen. Empowering people with tools, knowledge to reach potential and handle difficult situations in life. Wonderful. Thanks you all for participating. Feel free to continue to add those in or thoughts as we go on. I'd love to read them off more and be able to feel connected virtually to you all. Okay, so you all are active in the chat, much appreciated. But if you weren't paying attention, hopefully you are now, because there's really cute animals, cute puppies on the page now, and I can understand if you were me and I was distracted by something and then I saw a picture of cute puppies on the screen, I'd be really curious as to why they were up there. So now that I have your attention, I want to talk about an example of what prevention means to me. So since I moved to Chicago, I've been volunteering at a local rescue, and two challenges that arise frequently include pregnancy and heartworm disease. Not only do these cost the rescue a lot of money, but it can be harder to place animals in foster homes, especially if they have heartworm, because they need to be the only dog or cat when doing heartworm treatment because of the limited activity that's required as they're undergoing this treatment. While these puppies, mind you, there are 12 puppies there for one mama, are adorable and sweet, it's important to note that both pregnancy and heartworm in dogs or cats is preventable. In order for rescues and community agencies to try and address these concerns, they begin to learn about the why. The why is this a pattern? Figure out what barriers there are to spaying and neutering pets and heartworm prevents, and then intervene to provide education around the importance of these preventative measures and to be able to provide resources in order to create long-term changes. So I think about, especially right now, how difficult it is for a lot of people to provide for themselves or their families, and then we think about animals as well. And really, for both pregnancy and heartworm, the treatment that comes after is what you all were mentioning with those consequences after the fact and wanting to prevent that ahead of time. So this aligns with that in the sense of it costs money to do heartworm preventions, but compared to the cost of the treatment after the fact, and that it is something that risks the life of the animal, that it is something truly important, but also we need to be aware of like the cost that it is for heartworm preventatives and what we can do to better serve individuals who might struggle to afford those. Why we should care about prevention. So beginning in the 20th century, the major illnesses leading to death shifted from infectious diseases such as tuberculosis and infections in newborns to non-communicable diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. This shift was a result of effective public health interventions such as improved sanitation and immunizations that reduce the rate of infectious diseases, as well as increased rates of unhealthy behaviors and lifestyles, including smoking, poor nutrition, physical inactivity, and substance misuse. In fact, behavioral health problems such as substance use, violence, risky driving, mental health conditions, and risky sexual activity are now the leading causes of death for those aged 15 to 24. So let's start with public health and what we're talking about here. So the public health encompasses death via overdose and alcohol misuse, social impact, so both the direct and indirect costs related to crime, health, and loss lost productivity. Next, substance misuse is associated with a wide range of health and social problems, including heart disease, stroke, high blood pressure, cancers, specifically breast cancer, and mental health conditions and injuries. Substance use also related to the spread of infectious disease such as HIV and Hep C. Improving prognosis is to delay the early use and stop the progression from use to problematic use or to a substance use disorder, which are associated with deteriorating relationships, poor school performance, loss of employment, diminished mental health, and increases in sickness and death, such as motor vehicle crashes, poisoning, violence, or accidents. So I want to encourage you all to please post comments or questions in the chat box. And with thinking about this slide in particular, with the why we should care about prevention, throw out some feedback. What stood out to you? Does that align with what you responded to earlier in the chat box as well? So that brings us here. We all know prevention is important. We have some examples of why, and now we need to be intentional about the approaches to prevention in order to create a lasting impact. So here's an example that I like to think about when it comes to prevention is the work that I do at Thresholds. So working with young adults who have just experienced their first episode of psychosis within the last 18 months versus individuals who have been part of Thresholds for several years, if not decades, and why the same approach would not work for engagement and service implementation for both populations. So one thing that we do intentionally with our program is we identify individuals who utilize our services as clients, whereas in the Thresholds agency overall, individuals who utilize services are called members because they're part of the longer term piece of working with Thresholds, being a part of the agency, and knowing that long term they're going to be connected to the agency to some degree. Whereas in our first episode work, we see it as trying to stop the process of the mental health condition increasing to the degree of needing long-term reliance on a mental health system. So we're trying to help with stabilization and to be able to support an individual's natural support system in order for them to be able to return to the community and do the things that they want to be able to do. I really like this quote too. So I'll read it out loud. Research suggests that the United States urgently needs evidence-based policies and programs, including those that are community or population specific, to help stem the nation's tidal wave of deaths of despair. So thinking about our intention with this training, what you hope to get from it, and what you plan to take with you, I think the statement really says it all. And if you go back to your workplace and you want to share why it's so important for prevention, what is it that we need to do as both a community agency, the society, and within the country as a whole, is being really more intentional and informed instead of just going through these motions, really being open to revamping how we provide services, how we connect with individuals in order to create a better outcome and prognosis so that those long-term consequences and impacts are diminished and we're more so putting our time, money, and effort into trying to stop the use from becoming problematic and allow people to be able to avoid those long-term consequences. So we'll look at this data, tells the story that since the late 1900s, deaths from alcohol, drug misuse, and suicide have been steadily on the rise for all age groups, including millennials. Increases in alcohol, drug, and suicide deaths have affected all age groups and all communities, but the impact of people in their 20s and early 30s has been especially pronounced. In particular, the number of drug deaths among young adults has increased by 400% during the last 2 decades, in large part fueled by the opioid crisis. Drug deaths accounted for nearly 7 deaths per 100,000 people nationally across all age groups in 1999. By 2017, that number increased to 22.7 deaths per 100,000 across all age groups. But for young adults ages 18 to 34 in 2017, there were nearly 31 drug overdose deaths per 100,000 people. Meanwhile, alcohol death rates for young adults ages 18 to 34 went up 69% between 2007 and 2017, and suicide deaths for the same age group in same years went up 35%. So when we look at this, both I picked out Florida due to FATA being located there and Illinois being the state that I reside in. We're seeing that both Generation X and Y are experiencing particularly high rates of overdose death. And we're seeing that across a couple different states. This is a really good resource. You can pick different states to see their specific numbers, but across the board, most were the same as far as the age groups with the leading amounts. Both the 25 to 34-year-olds followed by 35 to 44-year-olds. This is a tremendous amount of lives lost, and we know that opioid overdose death is preventable. Use doesn't have to lead to overdose. Overdose doesn't need to lead to death. Even if people use, we can prevent the most serious harms of use, which is death, because opioid overdose is reversible with naloxone. This begs us to consider, what do we conceive of as prevention efforts when it comes to opioid overdose? How does that affect outcomes? Are we defining prevention as abstinence-based messaging? For opioid overdose, periods of abstinence increase likelihood of overdose because of how quickly tolerance changes. Do we include in prevention information and education about safer use strategies? Essentially, what are we trying to prevent? Use itself or specific outcomes such as overdose, or even more specifically, overdose death? Does prevention include harm reduction strategies such as opioid education and naloxone distribution, which is evidence-based prevention strategy proven to reduce overdose death? Well-supported scientific evidence demonstrates that a variety of prevention programs and alcohol policies that address these predictors prevent substance initiation, harmful use, and substance use related problems, and many have found to be cost effective. These programs and policies are effective at different stages of the lifespan, from infancy to adulthood, suggesting that it's never too early and never too late to prevent substance misuse and related problems. So now we have an understanding of why prevention is important from an individual, community, and societal perspective. But how do we build the bridge to evolve into more intentional prevention practices? All right, so here's a poll question for you all, just to get you thinking, see what you would assume for which generation most commonly uses illicit stimulants. So A, we have Gen X, B is millennials, C is boomers, and D is Gen Z. Go ahead and take a minute to respond to the poll question. Go ahead, and if you haven't answered yet, please answer the poll question about which generation you think most commonly uses illicit stimulants. About 20 more seconds, and then we'll go ahead and go over the poll results. All right. So it looks like the majority answered with millennials, followed by Gen Z, and then Gen X. Thanks for all who participated, and want to surprise you here that the answer is actually baby boomers. So this was something I was talking to Karina about yesterday, and how she was also surprised that this was the answer as well. So with the rising national crystal meth epidemic in the 90s and 2000s, you might think that millennials would be the ones most commonly using illicit stimulants, but in fact, the baby boomers' stimulant usage peaked slightly later than the other generations at age 22, and their peak frequency was nearly triple that of both Gen X and millennials. This may be explained by the fact that amphetamines were often prescribed as a treatment for depression after World War II, but were later subject to a regulatory crackdown due to widespread abuse. So we're not specifically focusing on the baby boomer generation, but it's important to note that assumptions and biases can mislead us, and it's important to both be informed and to stay curious. I like this comment from Vicki too, in the chat. It says, we need more community education in regards to Narcan. People are afraid to use it. It looks like Vicki helps educate people and distributes with the families that she serves. Thanks for that comment, Vicki. All right, so at this time, we're going to go ahead and shift the focus to defining the 3 generation groups that we're here to focus on and then get specific around interventions tailored for each. Okay, I always like that video because I think it's like a really nice, approachable way to think about different generations. And it's got upbeat music, so you can't really beat that in the morning. So, what is a generation? So, it's a cohort of people born within a particular period of time. A generation moves together from one life phase to another. I like the way this is stated, certainly because it's a collaborative of we're moving through different phases of life together. That doesn't mean everyone perceives things the same way or that we're all the exact same within our own generation, but that we are moving alongside each other at the same time space. So each generational interval is approximately 20 years in length. So 20 years represents the average length of time between birth and childbearing, or the beginning of the next generation. So the 20-year interval also represents the division of an average human lifespan of roughly 80 years into four distinct phases: youth, rising adulthood, midlife, and elderhood. So that's something I don't know if any of you all knew about why it's 20 years or that it was 20 years, but I thought that was something that would be helpful for us to know about why it is that this was chosen in naming the different generations. Okay, so we're going to start off with Generation X. So current ages would be between 41 and 61, born between the years 1960 and 1980. The philosophy is to work and produce. It's focused on individualism, ambition, tends to be workaholics, and experience the arrival of the internet, which leads me to this video that I hope you all enjoy.
Ashley, can you see the video? I'm sorry.
I cannot.
Okay, let me start it over. Sorry about that.
Okay, I'm not, I started to hear it, but now I don't. Karina, did you want to try it again, or should we just move forward and I can tell them what it was? All right. I do see someone commented that that was all too familiar. And when I was thinking about Gen X and the arrival of the internet, I couldn't help but think about what we now take for granted as the dial-up internet and how that was a process. But really seeing the images was kind of nice for me. I had forgotten what that was like, but I hope you all enjoyed that. I really wanted to include it just because now I think about connecting to the internet and how quickly it happens. And then the other perspective is now with working from home, it's like any slower like computer issues, we're like, oh no, why is it taking so long? But really we had to use dial up. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed that piece. So talking about Gen X too, so consider most Gen Xers are now in that middle adulthood period where we tend to see more stability, more focus on family and career, and less likely to experiment with new substances. Transitioning to Gen Y. So born between 1980 and 1995. Don't worry, I did the math ahead of time just to help. So ages 26 to 41 would be how old they are now currently. Gen Y is known as the millennials, the first multi-screen users. Social media arrived with this generation. So that's another beast of technology, right? Tend to be seen as mostly optimistic and narcissistic, specifically too with being the selfie culture, hence the selfie stick image. The economic crisis has impacted level of competition in the workplace. So what this means is, unlike previous generations, because of the economic crisis, the world requires them to be better trained to get a job as competition is increasing. Unlike their parents, Gen Y digital natives are not satisfied with the world around them and are ambitious and want to achieve their goals. Um, in addition, so millennials are currently in the stage of life where they usually tend to see a natural sort of like aging out phenomenon in terms of substance use as people get older and kind of settle into the routines with work and family. They tend to have more stable identity and friendships where we're less likely to see problematic use. For example, you're less likely to go out binge drinking every weekend when you're 35 versus when you're 21. Important to note as we transition to Gen Z that millennials are using social media frequently, but it tends to be Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And I'll talk about why that's important to point out as we move forward. Okay, so Generation Z, born between 1995 and 2009, ages 12 to 26. I thought it was really funny. I've been seeing on social media this meme being shared about how people born in 2000 are able to do the math easily about how old they are and everyone else is struggling, which, you know, I think is kind of hilarious. So they're known as the Centennials, transforming the system, their masteries of technologies, and they give voice to social causes on the internet. Also important to point out limited attention span and driven by that instant gratification. So they communicate with images, short text, and this is why they love to use Snapchat and Instagram. They share nonstop and generate content. They're committed to helping others and included to group action. So like committed to the environment as well. So Gen Z is it more in that adolescent, early adulthood, exploring their sense of identity separate from their family of origin with a high focus on peer groups and socialization. It is very likely to experiment, they are very likely to experiment with new substances and not very likely to have much experience or guidance around substance use, meaning they're still learning their limits, how to set boundaries with peers and substances, figuring out what a healthy and unhealthy relationship with drugs look like. So I think about this, if we're thinking about people who really thrive on sharing content, the use of images and short text, I think about platforms such as like Instagram that might have specific ads or advertisements that only show brief information or images about things that catches people's eyes, but then there's not that substance about not just the risk of it, but how to do things safely, what they should know, what they should consider if they're on the fence about using substances or different peer groups and their influences. So really think about intention and the fact of when we know about different generations and where they get their information, how they like to receive it, it's really important what's being put out there. And then in the services that we provide, how we're doing it. Are we lecturing someone in Gen Z about all the risk of, like a big thing for my work is use of substances and the impact on psychosis. But if I'm sitting there for 10 minutes lecturing someone about how marijuana can make someone's hallucinations worse, are they really going to take that in? Or would it be more helpful to do a condensed fact-based handout that's really brief and kind of points out things that are important for them to consider based on their values? So prevention here for Gen Z would need to include a lot more transparent and neutral information. So for this age group, we know that this age group is going to experiment with substances. So an abstinence only prevention approach is going to be particularly ineffective with this group. Though I mean, truly, that abstinence only approach really isn't effective with anyone, any group. But I think too, with this one, it's like knowing what we know, that people are going to experiment and use, and that their decisions are likely to be informed by their peer group and social group. It's really important for us to consider how they might receive that neutral but straightforward and transparent information in order to make healthy choices. Um, so prevention measures, as well as sudden changes in patterns of substance use, would be targeted and interpreted very differently with these different generations, in part because of their generational values and characteristics, but also because of their current life stage and developmental needs. So I think now would be a good time for us to take our 5-minute break before we go into specifics about different generations within the workplace and how to integrate that information, and then going into our prevention strategy. So go ahead, stand up, stretch it out, grab some more coffee, and I'll meet you all back here in 5 minutes. Okay, I hope everyone was able to get some coffee or caffeine or some water or take a stretch break. It's nice to have a little moment to pause in between um, the couple hours that we have together training.
Ashley, we do have a
Mhm.
question from the audience if you have time to answer it now.
Oh, sure.
Matthew asked if there was any research on how the high rate of drug use among baby boomers has impacted the children that they have raised.
Well, that's a really great question. And I know in prepping for this presentation, I actually found there to be a lot more information about the baby boomer generation. So I don't have anything specifically related to the boomers like children, but I do know that that came up quite a bit. Um, so that can be something if I get a chance to look into it, I can. Is there a way to forward information after the presentation, Karina, that I could do that?
Yes, Ashley's email will be provided at the end of the presentation, so you're welcome to email her if you're interested in more information. And I did post some information in the chat panel regarding Narcan training and a contact person for the DCF opioid overdose prevention. She's the coordinator. So if you'd like for me to send that again, I'll go ahead and post that in the chat panel.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks so much, Karina. Okay, so two things I want to do here. One is to get us back in the groove of this training, and I would like to do another mindfulness activity. But also, too, the mindfulness activity that I have is one of those mindfulness cards again, but it's about noticing connection. So, being that this is something that is virtual, but I so wish I could be in the same room with you all. If you all would take a moment and just in the chat, let me know where you're from. I don't know if most of you are probably from Florida. I live in Illinois, but I'm a Michigander. And I know at one of my other presentations, there were several people who were from Michigan too. So, as a way for us to feel connected, maybe put what state you're from, or if you're from Florida, go ahead and put what city you're at. So then I get a better sense of where people are logging in from and trying trying in order to build those connections, even though we can't all be in the same room together. Okay, so definitely have Florida. I did not know there was a place called Sunrise, Florida. That sounds really nice. I was joking with Karina yesterday about the heat wave we had in Chicago last week, meaning it got up to the 30s and 40s. So, and she told me 70 degrees and flip-flops. And I said, I don't even know where my flip-flops are located. So, again, perspective, right? Winter Haven. Oh, we have a Michigander. Marie, where are you from in Michigan? I'm curious. A couple Sarasota. We got Jacksonville, Orlando, Crestwood, Tampa, another Orlando, Punta Gorda. Oh, from Grand Rapids. Very cool. Yeah, lots of people in Florida, but it's nice to also see some. Oh, yay, Gaylord, Michigan. There's a really good popcorn place there. Um, okay, thank you all. I think it helps just hearing from different people about where we're at, where we're together. We have someone from Texas and a lot of different Michigan connections too. Awesome.
And Ashley, if you don't mind, I would like to remind everyone when you're sending your comments and questions,
Hmm.
please make sure you send it to the host and presenter or to all panelists to make sure we're all seeing your comments and questions. If you send it just to the host, it's only coming to me and I just have to refer that over or relate that back over to Ashley. Thank you.
Oh, yes, please send it to all of us because I don't want to miss a comment or question. Definitely wouldn't be intentional. Oh, Hollywood, Florida. Actually, the person who connected me with FATA is from there. So very cool. All right, I'm trying to scroll through these quickly, but also I just love knowing where people are from. Midland too. My sister lives in Saginaw. Oh, you're from Flint, Marie. Very cool. That's where my family's from. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and transition to that mindfulness activity, kind of the midway point. So this mindfulness card is called Notice Connections, and here's what it says. Cultivating insight is all about understanding the connections between things. But before you can understand connections, you have to see them. Whether you see something interesting happening in your experience, practice looking for related connections. For example, if you're distracted by something while you're working, try recalling what emotion you felt just before the distraction. Or when you feel a sensation in your body, notice what distinguishes the sensation from all the sensations you don't normally notice. This practice of noticing will illuminate the connections between your mind, body, and experiences. Okay, so now we're going to go into motivations of the generations X, Y, and Z. So thinking about this, I thought about like, what's the buy-in? What style might you use in therapy or another service you might be providing to someone in order to see what it is that's going to allow them to feel connected, heard, and understood when discussing substance use, misuse, or risk. Would you use an approach like motivational interviewing? Connecting to this image and flexibility that's mentioned so often in here. And two, with the context of the pandemic, I think it's really important to think about what it is we might be asking someone to do, and that it is something that is new and challenging. So something like if someone were to be open to participating in a program to address substance use, like, would they be willing to do it virtually? Would they be opposed to doing it virtually because that's hard for them, or they need to have that connection to people? Would they want to do in person? Do they want to feel like they can get out of their house and go somewhere and be able to focus on what it is that they want to focus on? Because, you know, there might be other people in the home and it might be hard to be open about what it is that's going on for them. So thinking about the buy-in, also take a moment, think about yourself, right? If you're in a situation where you're trying to decide if you want to do something, you're on the fence, right? Those stages of change are in pre-contemplation. What do I want to do? Where do I want things to go? What would it be that made you want to buy into what someone's offering when it comes to services and when it comes to support? All right, so we're going back to Gen X. And so some of the information here is more so based on work environments. So it's specific to the workplace, but it can certainly be transferred into prevention strategy. So I think about those transferable skills, right? I've always been told if you've worked in the food industry, like, you definitely have a lot of transferable skills that can be utilized in any sort of work environment, because you have to be used to kind of dealing with people who are unhappy or really wanting things to be a different way, and it's outside of your control, but you have to be able to respond in a way that's useful and also be able to navigate the situation with grace, right? You can't just react to it. So oh, I'm seeing a comment here from Clarence saying that a lot of people struggled with 12-step Zoom meetings due to lack of physical connection and there were quite a few relapses. Yeah, that's something with young people I've worked with, that they really, when there were some in-person AA meetings made available, they really wanted to do that because it felt better to be connected to people. And also too, I think that boredom of like being in our own space all day, every day, or like even being in a space with like a family member, a roommate, or someone that can create sort of an environment that's hard to be healthy in. It's also important to consider too. So thank you for that comment, Clarence. Okay, so for Gen X, I'm going to go ahead and read these out loud. So prefers to work independently, believes career progression should be based on competence, not age, rank, or seniority. So some of the rewards favored by Gen X include recognition from boss, gift cards, experiential rewards, and flexible schedules. So like an example I thought of for being able to take this workplace information and put it into different interventions would be, let's say for Gen X, they value competence, right? So it would be helpful to explore, again, because we don't want it to assume, but explore if they'd respond more so to a peer in recovery due to those firsthand experiences versus the director of a substance use program who might have more of that educational advancement. So the question might be, hey, are you someone that you would see competence as someone who's actively worked through it themselves versus, oh, I've got the best person to help support you, but maybe they feel so far removed because they don't have their own lived experience. And so that would be something important to consider. I also think too, with working independently, I would wonder if that might show up in wanting to do more of the individual or one-on-one versus group work or group processing. But again, these are things that each person is different, and it would be important to consider that and also be curious about it as opposed to making the assumption, like going back to the poll question where baby boomers was one of the, I think it was the one that people answered least for the stimulants question, but actually they were the most. So just something to consider. All right, so for Generation Y, motivated by skills training, I think of DBT, and mentoring. So in my team, we have a peer mentor who is a wonderful advocate and support person to our clients. And I've noticed that a lot of the clients that I work with that also work with her as a peer mentor are able to talk about different things like different experiences with interpersonal relationships or different opportunities in a way where they feel that there's not that power dynamic that comes with like a clinician providing services. And it's been really great to see how people have been able to utilize our peer mentor as a support person in a way that feels for them like it's an open space, and for them to be able to respond in a way where it's like, oh, this is my mentor, as opposed to, oh, I don't want to tell my therapist that. So for Gen Y, workplace culture and feedback are important. So what is the culture of the place where they might be receiving services? What's the presentation of the waiting room? Does it feel warm and welcoming? Does it feel medical and cold? Something to think about, right? Because we want to, when we go back in person, or if you are, think about what it is that we're presenting with people and making sure it aligns with a space that's conducive to their comfort level and change. So preferred rewards for Gen Y include recognition from boss, time off, I understand that, and flexible schedules. So with the skills group, again, something like DBT, we learn something, we apply it, and that helps. Or mentoring, like a recovery support specialist. and also knowing that the culture and feedback is important for this group as well. Is everyone else able to hear me? I see a comment about sound not working. Can you just let me know in the chat if it's all good before I move forward? Okay. Thank you, everyone. I didn't want to keep going if no one could hear me, because that would leave only my dog to hear about it, and she's already fallen asleep. So that wouldn't feel too good. Thanks, everyone. I think if you're still having issues with it, I think Karina said there's a different way to call on with the audio. So go ahead and reach out to her if you have any issues with that, and she can support you with getting the sound back on. All right, so Gen Z. So this one, as I've been talking about different strategies for X and Y, go ahead and throw it in the chat how you might use some of these workplace examples to apply it to prevention or treatment. So go ahead and answer that, and I'll read some out loud. But Gen Z is motivated by meaningful work and being given responsibility. They want to know that their work impacts the organization. They want projects that combine passion and excitement. So rewards preferences include recognition from boss, which that's a big one, and experiential rewards, just like Gen X, and badges too. Okay, so I'm seeing a response. Again, throw out in the chat how you might use this information about Gen Z in your approach to prevention. So I have Susan who said, take into consideration the generation and their beliefs. Yep. What about like the motivation for Gen Z, that meaningful work and wanting something passionate? Like what would that look like? It's too bad this isn't a workshop where we could have group discussions about this. Encourage group work and creativity, absolutely. Have clients in this generation create a public service announcement in unique ways, such as TikTok video. Yes, that's an awesome idea. Reminds me of another training I did with FATA about the prevention of the spread of COVID, and there was a TikTok video about how to properly wash your hands. So I thought that was really cool. Gen Z clients could have the client attend multidisciplinary meetings where they receive positive feedback about the progress. I like that. I think too with the work that I do, we have like an education and employment specialist, the peer mentor, a prescriber, the clinician, and I think hearing that and also encouraging that motivation of progress and moving forward would be nice. Social involvement in causes, yes. Like what does this mean for not just me as an individual, but in the work that I do, what impact might this have for other people? Could it be something where there's an opportunity for that mentoring, or within a school to then present to a different grade as well? I think that those would all be really great ways to approach this. From Alina, participating in a local social media campaign and offering a reward such as community service hours. Absolutely. I think too, one of the things is like, I don't know if other people feel this, but there's some pressure, right, to serve different people and different approaches. Whereas I think like based on the generation we're talking about, information coming from their peers and in a way that's presentable and authentic can make more of a difference as opposed to other people trying to rack their brain of like how to fall into that, right? I think we need to utilize the resources that we have within the capacity of the community we're in or the agency or the people that we serve. And I think too with like group presentation, or sorry, group work, or being able to like present like a social media campaign could be a really useful use of resources. Let me see. listen to their opinions and ideas, engagement, helping the underprivileged. These are all great. Gen Z clients can create artwork for display. We guide how we involve different generations. Yeah, Alexis, I like the comment here that says there's a common theme of being people from each generation wanting to be recognized. Absolutely. I think too, a conversation I had with one of my clients, I think it was last week or it was the week before that, where he had told me he was really proud that he had gone 2 out of 4 days without smoking weed. And for him, that was a really big accomplishment, because typically weed is something that he uses in order to regulate himself. And so not having it forces him to sit with like discomfort or difficult emotions. And so I think that the praise and what I did was really recognized. I know that's a big deal, like, and asking about how he was able to do it. And he was just smiling, so happy about it, despite saying, oh, I know it's not a long time. I was like, no, like, that's a big deal. Let's give you some praise there for it. So definitely important on that end. So we got another comment about involving the client, so Generation Z, in creating projects that help inform them. And we also have another comment that says, because activism is huge, make them ambassadors so they can go to local spaces and advocate in ways that speak to their peers. Absolutely. There's a new place in Chicago called Coffee, Hip Hop, and Mental Health that are working to normalize therapy for populations that typically there's a big stigma related to receiving mental health support and services. So I think that bringing people in who share similar background or from the same generation can really be helpful. So okay, I'm going to read like 2 more comments, then we'll keep going. You all are doing great just by sharing your comments, and I really love being able to read them out loud. Again, going back to that piece of connectedness. So from Penny, we have small group work on a substance topic, share with others, like the graphic t-shirt. Very cool. All right. And I think too, for the rewards preferred, aside from recognition, the badges, I think about almost like some sort of incentive or target piece that people can move through. And so you have some picture of, here's where I'm at, but then for me, this is how progress looks. So people can have that piece to move through. Okay, so this is where we're going to transition to the areas of improvement for prevention strategies in order to become more inclusive, intentional, and therefore effective. So consider how your definition of prevention might change depending on which generation you're working with. One size doesn't fit all. So think about, what generations do you serve in your role currently? How do you need to adapt your prevention efforts to be a better fit? So think again, when I was talking about Gen Z and the short replies and images and how that plays into Instagram, what would that look like? Is that who you serve? Do you tend to serve X or Y more frequently? Oh, I hear for Ron that they have a training program that allows you to earn badges as courses are completed. That's awesome. And we've got Al, who works a lot with Gen Z. So I'm hoping that this piece is helpful as far as adapting and learning more approaches, but also Al, feel free to add in any tips or advice that you have from your own experience as well. Okay, so previous prevention efforts have focused efforts mostly on addressing specific substances by use of public health announcements or community education programs. So, here, like, think about growing up, or maybe not growing up, but at some point or phase in your life, thinking about a public health announcement or community education program that comes to mind, where there was specific focus on substances, or there was a community-based education program. What comes to mind as something you might have experienced firsthand or that came up? Go ahead and throw that in the chat too. And after I talk through this slide, I'm going to read some again to see who shared similar experiences with feeling connected. Okay, so please note that this process shown above has been more reactive in nature, meaning identify a specific substance as an issue, which then gains the attention of the community providers or stakeholders, community members, and then a strategy to intervene is developed based on the current information known on who is using during that time, and then the interventions are implemented. So again, we're noticing a substance as an issue, then attention is brought to it and identified as problematic for the movers and the shakers in the community, right? People who are providers, stakeholders, and some community members. But I think that piece often gets overlooked about which community members are contributing to this and the plan. And then a strategy to intervene is developed based on that information, but that information that is current at that moment, right? So consider the differences being taking information about what we know about risk factors, protective factors, and other influences of each generation, and then creating an approach that takes into account their specifics and approach it as a case study versus more of this really focused and zeroed in approach that views it more as, like, I like to think of this as in, let's say in the private practice world, there's an outpatient client that presents with depression or might identify a recent loss or stressor or trauma, right? And that's what they come in identifying as their presenting problem or the thing that they want to work on. But later, we find out more about their use of substances in order to have been coping with what they're presenting with or what they've done previously, their life experiences and their patterns and their motivation, right? Oh, my friend group told me this is how you deal with being sad. You go and smoke or you go and drink, right? Without knowing that alcohol is a depressant. So I think that the approach really is, even though someone comes in with a presenting problem, that there are layers to what also is going on, and prevention efforts need to better reflect that, not just in the moment what's standing out, but rather what's deeper within the layers of what could be most helpful to target. Okay, it looks like we have a few responses from what I was asking you guys to respond to with the public health announcements or community education programs. DARE is definitely something that came to mind. I like pictured, I don't know if anyone else had this, it was like a stuffed animal, but it was like a lion, but it was wearing a DARE shirt with a good old black background and DARE written in red. That's what I always think of for that program. We have This Is Your Brain on Eggs. Got, oh, I was like, okay, so on drugs, not eggs, typo. Okay, This Is Your Brain on Drugs. Lots of DARE program throughout grade school. And then we also have Nancy Reagan's Just Say No campaign as well. Okay. And more recently, educating Gen Z about sexual consent. Yes. feeling connected needs deep, substantial conversations. We have the Wheel of Misfortune, Montana Meth Project, school public announcements, yes, where they're like posters or were there like events or different training opportunities in schools where they would present different things, or was it more so that visual representation as in like a poster that people saw daily? Student assistant program, which is substance use prevention in schools. Counselors in the classroom. MAD, so Mothers Against Drunk Driving. I remember at Michigan State that was definitely a program that worked a lot with individuals, people who may have gotten caught drinking underage in the dorms would have to go through different programming. And I know they would bring in some different groups to talk to individuals as well. And Scared Straight, yes, definitely. All right. Oops. Okay. So this quote from Eric, who's a clinical assistant professor at the IUPUI School of Nursing. He participated in the study that we're going to take recommendations from. So to read his quote, because I think it is important, we need to start approaching the problem of substance use disorder from the basis of what makes individuals abuse one or more substances instead of what substances are abused in a community. The current prevention approach does not consider the fact that what makes a child develop a substance use disorder is different from what will cause an adult or older adult to abuse the same substance. Prevention is for everyone. Unique developmental factors in life stressors in different age groups, potential misuse of more than one substance at a time, and multiple risk factors for developing substance use disorder. Again, we're not thinking about how an outpatient individual might just present to a private practice and mark a box on an intake sheet or write depression. We want to know the deeper layers of what's going on, what generational influences impact this person, how they receive their information about substances and harm reduction approaches, as opposed to an abstinence only sort of approach that really limits people's ability to engage in that straightforward, transparent knowledge, and then being able to make decisions in an informed way where they have that information. We know that they're going to experiment with substances, but how can we assure to the best of our ability that people are going to be aware of what it is that can put someone at higher risk, but not limit the information that they get. We want people to be informed here. Okay, so we're going to now go over different risk factors for developing substance use disorder by age groups. So I'll start with the children section. So this is less than 18 years old. So among children and adolescents, there are several risk factors for developing a substance use disorder. This includes adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, and trauma. Environmental risk factors included peer pressure, participation in organized athletics, and a family history of substance misuse. Demographic risk factors for substance use disorder include race, sexuality, gender identity, and socioeconomic status. For the young adult age group, so age 18 to 25, for young adults who already have childhood risk factors such as ACEs, the added stress of adulthood can place them at risk for misusing substances. Latent family history, lack of positive parental role models, employment and academic stress also can increase the likelihood of young adults misusing substances. I'm just going to read that one again. Latent family history, lack of positive parental role models, employment, and academic stress. Again, thinking about how a lot of people within the generations pointed out this wanting recognition or praise or feedback from bosses. Just a side note there. Additionally, receiving potentially addictive prescription medications for the first time. So for example, for minor surgical procedures, it can put young adults at risk for substance use disorder. Adults ages 26 to 64 years. The major stressors for this age group are related to family life and career. Different careers are associated with substance use disorders in adults, including high stress jobs and heavily physical jobs. So some examples include healthcare, military service, and law. Professional athletes in this age group who perform both high stress and extremely physical jobs are also at increased risk of substance use disorder. Okay, last but not least, the older adults group. So this is older than 65 years. While many of the risk factors, such as PTSD and ACEs in younger age groups, are present in older adults, they also experience unique age-related risk factors for substance use disorder, such as experiencing grief and loss more frequently due to the deaths among family and friends. The sense of loss can also lead to physical and social isolation, which then leads to substance use disorder. I think about this one for the pandemic and how isolated individuals who might be in assisted living facilities are. I don't know if anyone here works with older adults currently, but I also wonder too what the research will say in collecting information about substance use disorder for older adults and in this time of a pandemic where we're all feeling really isolated, but also not being able to see our loved ones and connect with them, and what that sense of loss or not being able to have a sense of closure in losing someone also is contributing to. So for older adults, their greater tendency for chronic physical illnesses, such as arthritis and other chronic pain conditions, also increase the likelihood of misusing substances to relieve pain. So here's what we can do to support prevention for everyone. First, we can identify risk factors for developing a substance use disorder in each generational age group. We can use the list of risk factors to develop screening tools that are specific to generational and developmental age groups, using language that resonates with them. Develop intervention strategies based on screen results. So education, empowerment through mentoring, which I know mentoring definitely came up a lot for Gen Z when we were talking about different ideas. Social media targeted communication, and workplace orientation information. So I'm going to dive into this just a little bit more. Just need a sip of water. Been talking what feels like a long time, so just give me 1 second and we'll dive deeper. Okay, so thinking about this presentation with prevention being for everyone, it's something that we should consider about like our own biases about different generations. Are there messages about this generation that we have internalized? How do we distinguish between normative, healthy use of substances at different stages of life versus those more problematic or harmful uses? How do we go about prevention interventions in ways that help us to facilitate and maintain connections with people, particularly at-risk groups, rather than pushing people away? Back to my example, right? If I would have continued down the path of giving a lot of information and almost lecturing a young adult about how his marijuana use increases his hallucinations, he wouldn't care. He'd check out. This is exactly what we're talking about when it's like pushing people away. We want to focus on how we facilitate and keep that connection with people, right? Because we aren't going to be helpful in any prevention strategies if no one wants to listen to us. It requires us to do a lot more asking, listening, and reflecting. How do we collaborate with people so that they tell us what's going on at both the community and individual level? Thinking about within our current agency, community, or society, how do we gather information about how to be more intentional about the prevention strategies that we're implementing for communities? I did a training with FATA about youth coalitions for youth and by youth, and I think that's super important, right? I've been part of what intended to be a collaboration that actually felt like we're coming in there as the providers or professionals in trying to intervene with well intentions, but not taking in what it is that the people who would be utilizing our services and the community members who support these individuals really want. We're essentially just creating the space, but there's a misstep there if we're not taking the time to talk to the people and understand what it is that they want and need, even if it's something that, is a little off the books or different from what we're used to or what we expected. How do we adapt to that in a way to create a space for individuals to learn more, create safer using habits, or prevent that from getting to the point of those negative consequences we've been talking about? Another thing we need to think about is what risk factors are present, right? If someone doesn't use, what does that mean within their home or within the social group that they hang out with? Is it safe for them to not use? Could something happen if they don't? What concerns do they have? What kind of support and help do they want? How can we, as the providers, supporters, mentors, people who have interest, right? How can we make prevention support and information accessible to people across generations? So prevention, thinking as my former supervisor would say, as an outreach worker, you have to go where the people are, talk to them, hear their concerns, and then see how you can help, right? It's not the other way around. It's not trying to help before trying to understand. We really need to take that step back and hear about people's experiences, where they're at, what their concerns are, and then start to consider ways in which we could be helpful. Prevention strategies should mirror our same philosophy of care we use in effective treatment, meeting people where they're at, collaborating, offering a menu of choices instead of dictating or preaching to people. Focus heavily on relationship building because no one's going to tell you anything useful if they don't trust you, feel safe and listened to, or respected. I think about this too as working with young adults, right? They have options. They can decide whether or not they want to participate in our services. And I think that's something as they're transitioning into adulthood and they might have the influence of parents or social groups or schools that tell them you should do this, you should do that because it'll be helpful, right? But I found that I'm able to retain um, individuals as clients when they feel like, oh, I have that option. I can leave if I want, I can stop coming to services, but you know what? I feel like when I'm here, I'm listened to, I'm given choices, and I'm not just told you have to do these things, right? Because quite honestly, no one likes being told to do something. But I think too, we need to present that opportunity across the generations, but especially too in considering where people are at in their developmental stages and allowing them to have those moments to have a sense of autonomy and make choices and be able to have that space to make decisions without it feeling pressured or coerced, right? No one wants to feel that way, and especially too if we're talking about deeper levels of why people use, right? Because of trauma and because of peer pressure and wanting to feel connected. Like that's something that makes people feel really vulnerable to identify and talk about. So building that relationship where someone feels like they can trust you and they feel listened to and respected and not judged or trying to off the bat change them, right? We need to seek to understand regardless of where they're at in their generations, and especially if we're in a different generation of individuals than when they serve, thinking about, okay, if I'm older than them, how can I identify my experience with the stage they're in and what might be the same, what might be different? How do we build those connections, right? How do we set our intentions to not feel like we have to jump into that problem solving mode, that fixing mode, but rather, how do we seek to understand with this information that we have about the generations, but also to stay curious, right? To understand if it's something where they really align with and resonate with this culture of instant gratification and use of Instagram and brief messages, or if they're like other people were saying earlier, when that AOL dial-up came on, took you right back to sitting in front of that computer monitor, hoping no one was on the phone, because if they were, you were going to have to wait to go online and hear whether or not you got mail, which is really interesting because now if we had that go off every time we got an email and it said you got mail, how many of you would silence your emails so you didn't have to hear it all the time? Like that ding noise is enough, right? So thinking about that, how do we build connections, but then remain curious to the individual specifically in building our alliance with them so that we can better support and service them. All right, so bear with me here. I want to pull up a resource page, but it's going to take me just a minute to do so. throw out any questions or comments in the meantime. And Karina, if there's anything that pops up, if you could just read it to me, that would be wonderful. Okay, so you all should be able to um, see my screen right now. And this is a resource I really like, and I think this would be like if you have a team meeting and you just want to give a brief synopsis of like what we talked about today in general. This is a really approachable, easy handout, or sorry, web page. You could download it, but it focuses specifically on millennials. So this is the psychology of successfully marketing to millennials. But again, keep in mind, like this information can be applied to the work that we do. So it compares to Gen X and baby boomers. So again, this has a little bit more information comparison. So one of the, I guess I would say, not problems, but limitations is that only identifies male versus female majority in this, and knowing that we're not just contained to those two boxes, just something to keep in mind if you were to share with clients, but rather something just, use it as you will. So it talks about the different populations with window shopping, engaged in the digital world. And then as we scroll down, different devices. So again, we have in our program these 6-month surveys that we have individuals take. One of them is focused on satisfaction with the treatment that we provide, and the other one is based on symptom presentation and quality of life. So we have a QR code that we send on smartphones to individuals because they're more likely to respond to completing the survey that way as opposed to getting an email. Media usage, we got newspaper, internet, radio, social media too. I think too, just thinking about the different forms of social media as well is really important. Spending preferences. Oh goodness. Look at the differences here too, right? Like what are people going to spend their income on? Each one of these for millennials, Gen X, and baby boomers are different here. We have socialization as a front runner for millennials. For Gen X, it's personal insurance. Baby boomers, we got healthcare being the top one too. I also think too, this food away from home, I'm definitely guilty of that during this pandemic. That's one of the ways I've been treating myself. So shopping preferences, how they're going to use their computer. Since my dad discovered Amazon, that's where he orders all of our gifts from. So also too, I think that having that environmental impact or wanting to have some sort of feeling of being able to help contribute to the greater society at whole. Different brands such as Warby Parker and Tom's, where they give back or donate some of their money to being able to give the same product to someone more in need. That is definitely a good strategy of engaging people who are millennials, because then they feel better about contributing their money to those brands as well. So here's the lineup of like the end piece of best practices for marketing to millennials: multi-platform, social media, be authentic, informational blogs too. So again, that's a great resource. And if it's something where you only have a little bit of time between team meetings, just to kind of briefly go over differences to consider when we're trying to market to millennials, whether it's the services we're trying to market, the programs that we have, or even just in how we talk about what our services are. One more resource. This one is not as pretty and straightforward, but definitely something that if you have time or want to spend a little bit time going over, I got a lot of my references for this presentation from this. So alcohol and drug misuse and suicide and the millennial generation, a devastating impact. So this is where I got my charts and some good information about different areas of focus for the millennial population, different pieces about childhood risk and protective factors. And then at the end, there is, let me see. There is a list of recommendations, but also there's like specifics ahead of that too. So just in the interest of time, look it up. It's on the resource page, and that is a helpful source of information there. Okay, so as we wrap up for today, I'd like you to think about the following. What's the most important thing you learned from today? What's one thing you plan to take from this training and to implement in your personal life, in your work life, within your teams, or within your agency? And what are some things you're already doing well? So if you feel inclined, please put this in the chat. I'd love to read some out loud in order to, again, reinforce that connection of all of us doing this training together and to do our final mindfulness activity together. So think about your answers to these prompts. And as I read the last mindfulness card as we wrap up our time together today, reflect on what it is you hope to take from this training, what stood out to you. And the mindfulness card that I am going to read as we wrap up is called Thank You. And here's what it says. If we zoom out from our individual experiences, it becomes obvious how interconnected and interdependent we are. From the train drivers who make it possible for us to get to work, to the coffee pickers in countries we'll never visit, who make our morning caffeine routine possible. The more we look, the more we see that our lives rely on hundreds, thousands, maybe even millions of other people around the globe. Try sending a silent thank you next time you take a sip of coffee or step off a train. You'll find that cultivating small moments of appreciation will fill your heart and brighten your day. Okay, so I'm going to read off a couple of comments here. So from Janice, we have learning the different generations and what motivates them helps me moving forward when working with clients. Absolutely. Being mindful of, for Shireen, I'm definitely being mindful already of my generation and that there are differences between generations. Yes, like the connectedness piece, we need to notice it first in order to make those connections. Shampa is planning on using most of these things with your clients, meet with clients where they're at, and this will help more. Let's see, the differences in the way generations learn. This explains why my mother doesn't respond to text messages until 2 days later. I hear you on that one. Being a better listener, meeting clients where they're at, being flexible. I love it. How generations really view the world around them, respecting clients' autonomy. Yes. I love this really vulnerable response from Danielle. Very surprised at how much I've been generalizing generations and look forward to taking time to use specifics to approach them better. Absolutely. the importance of asking questions and understanding and not assuming, and the role of choice in prevention and treatment. Who for the card resource, let me see what I can do. It's a box of cards that it just says mindfulness cards, simple practices for everyday life, and it's by Rohan. Let me see if I can type this in here. In order to give to you all. It's I was able to find them at Target in the section where it's right next to the cards, and they have some like stationery stuff. That's where I was able to find it at. Let me send this in the chat. So again, want to just take a moment and thank you all for all that you do, for spending your time with me this morning, taking time out of your day, being intentional, noticing connections. Thanks again to Karina and Eric for helping with the tech side of things, the background piece, to FATA, to Florida Department of Children and Families. I hope you all are able to enjoy the rest of your day. Take a moment to pause as you transition into the next piece of whatever the day may hold. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I think you did a great job, and you also did a great job answering and reading out the comments to everyone. I did post the training materials or resources links that you requested from the audience in the chat panel. So if you want to check out the chat panel, those links are all there. And I just have a few conclusion slides I need to go through that will answer some questions regarding the evaluation and everything. This is Ashley's email address. If you have questions that you forgot to ask or we didn't have time to answer, go ahead and jot that down. When I conclude today's webinar, your browser is going to take you to an evaluation on our website. If you want to receive CE credits or a statement of credit, please complete the evaluation. Your feedback is very important to us. You'll be prompted to register or sign in to complete the evaluation. And so it's important that you register with our website and create a profile. You can register as a visitor at no cost. For CEs to be reported to CE broker for Florida licensed healthcare practitioners, you must provide an accurate Florida Department of Health license prefix and number the first time that you register. After you register or sign in, you will be directed onward to the evaluation. You may consider using the same email address when you register for our webinars through our WebEx link, and also the same email that you set up in your profile in FATA system. This helps to connect your attendance and your profile. You will also get a second opportunity to complete the evaluation through an email that you should receive at the close of this webinar. The sender will be Messenger at WebEx. The evaluation will close on Monday, March the 19th. So that again, it's midnight Monday, March the 9th. So we do not email statements of credit. Instead, after we verify your attendance and the completion of the evaluation, a statement of credit will be generated as a journal entry within your profile. And it usually takes up to 30 days. So once you complete the survey, it takes up to 30 days for your credits to post to your profile. Also, again, if you want to review this recording, it will be available on our website within 30 business days. You can visit our website at www.fata.org and navigate to our Resource Center Training Library. And I would like to conclude by thanking you for participating in today's webinar. We'd also like to recognize and thank especially the Florida Department of Children and Families Office of Substance Abuse and Mental Health for funding today's education. And again, Ashley, thank you so much. And everyone have a great rest of your day, and please hold for the evaluation. Thank you.